Hello, everyone. I am a little bit taken aback here because I didn't realize I was supposed to be starting this afternoon. I don't have the information
Doc,
regarding our speaker.
I can
Um,
go ahead and
and
start,
so
Gwen, since I'm gonna introduce Russell. So
okay, well,
I can go ahead and
okay.
do good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. I know it's late in some areas and early in some. I'm out here in Arizona, it's only 4 o'clock, and I'm sure it's 7 o'clock in other areas. So we want to just go ahead and start. We just want to thank each and every person for joining us today. Um, And we also want to thank you for joining those other months that you participated in our presentations. Our goal is to have presentations that's going to support everyone to get through the process. So that's why every month we have a different person from the institution that gives us highlights or gives us information on things that we need to get through the program. And I said we because I am part of the AADSG, but I'm also a graduate of Grand Canyon. And so Gwen and we graduated last year. Um, I believe it was October of 2024.
Yeah, October
October
14th.
2024. And so, but we still feel like we're part of the process because we're here to assist other people. So we have to learn the new template and get information from other areas, just like the individuals who are part of the program. And the reason why we do that is because we want to make sure that we're on top of what the school is expecting and what they desire for individuals to complete the program. So, to say all of that, we never stop learning. And we're going to always continue to keep abreast of what the changes that are taking place in the school. And we're going to always try to learn what they expect for the other doctoral learners to get through the process. And that's our goal. Um, I want to share with you that we not only have presentations once a month, but we also meet weekly on Mondays for study sessions. And before I, kind of introduce our speaker, I just want to share something about the study session. So, when I was in the program, the study session was very, very beneficial for me. There was a few of us who got together on Monday evenings, I believe, or Saturdays. It was so many days, and we actually stayed on the phone with each other or on Zoom for about 2 or 3 hours, and then we did it more than once a week. And that study session allowed me to focus and allowed me to kind of have communication with other learners to kind of feed just kind of bouncing off ideas or some thoughts that I was having while I was writing. And so the study session really helped me get through the program. Now, a lot of times, Vicky was part of the study session. Donald was, it was a few of us. And sometimes we stayed beyond the 3 hours. Sometimes we stayed on for 4 or 5 hours. But the whole purpose was to have somebody there to support us in case we have any questions, in case we wanted to bounce anything off of each other. And that's the reason why we also offer it to all the doctoral learners who want somebody there to support them if they have questions. That's why we continue to learn. And if you just want to be in an environment, even though it's through Zoom, that you can focus. And so I just wanted to share that with everyone because we do have faithful ones that come every week, like Miss Bell, Miss Bailey. They're faithful. And in our next presentation, before we do the presentation, hopefully we can have them give, kind of share with you, their response and how they feel that the study sessions are working for them. But I can tell you that study session got me through the program when I participated. And so that's the reason why we also offer it to you. So I want to just give it a little tidbit before I introduce the speaker. So our guest speaker for today is our very own Mr. Russell Haynes. Um, who currently serves as a lead mediator and executive coach at Phoenix and Associates LLC. Mr. Haynes is a former Dean of Retention Management and Associate Dean of Business, Public Service, and IT at two community colleges in Dallas. Mr. Haynes, he's also a member of and one of the directors of the African American Doctoral Support Group, which is who we are right now. And he has been the voice behind the push, if I can say that. Only he has the experience in higher education and in this area. And so Mr. Haynes, Dr. Gwen, Miss Vicky, and I believe that's all that's on the line today. We're all part of the doctoral program, well, the support group. And as I said before, we're here to support you. We're here to help you. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Haynes so he can go ahead and start his presentation.
Okay. Thank you so much for that introduction, Dr. Morgan. I just want to say welcome to all, and it is exciting that we're seeing you guys here, and we want to have a conversation today, and I want to share some information, and this information is really relevant to individuals who are starting this process or in the middle of this process to understand what it is that you're going to need to be thinking about as you move forward. Give me 1 second. I need to go back to the home page right here. Okay. So as we go through the presentation today, one of the things I'd like for each of you to do is to have something next to you that will allow you to write. And as you have questions or you create questions based on what we're talking about, what I'd like for you to do is put those questions into the chat so that we can come back to those questions as we get going through the entire presentation. So today our topic is psychological maturity, doctoral learner identity. So we're wanting to talk about what does it take for you as a doctoral student to transition from being a doctoral student to becoming a researcher. The key,
Russell, I'm
yes,
sorry to interrupt you. You're not in presentation mode. I mean, you are, but you're showing all your screen. I mean, all
okay,
your
thank you.
slides.
Give me a second. Give me 1 second. What about now?
Yes.
That's better.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that catch. Sometimes it does what it wants to do without you knowing. As I was saying, what we're talking about here is your ability to transition from a doctoral student to an independent researcher. The doctoral process and becoming a doctor takes on a totally different perspective, and that's what I want to talk about today. So let's start with, okay. Okay. So as we talk about here with success as a doctoral student, what does it require? Well, it requires for the doctoral student to be psychologically mature and create a learning identity of who are you as a doctoral student and who will you become as a researcher. So the objectives of our presentation today is just to provide some key strategies for understanding the expectation of changing your identity from a student to a scholar researcher. That's the conversation that we're having. Now, there are differences between a doctoral student and faculty researchers. So most of our faculty are researchers. They have already gotten their doctorates, and a lot of them actually do independent research that they actually provide for whatever discipline that they're in. So these are independent researchers that are spending time to help doctoral students learn how to become researchers. Now, what we're saying is the differences between the two cannot be easily eliminated because they arise from irreducible differences and the type of work that doctoral students and faculty researchers do. So here we have researchers that are preparing us, and this is not the easiest job that there is out there, right? And the aim of the doctoral program here at GCU is to turn experienced practitioners into accomplished scholars. Usually when you get to this particular piece, there is a cultural clash between the doctoral student and a university faculty, right? And that usually ends up having a collision that ends up playing out. And this ends up with a problem where you have to accommodate potentially conflicting professional worldviews. So your faculty is going to have one worldview, and you as the doctoral student is going to have a different worldview. Now, how do faculty researchers get doctoral students to get the experience to become effective researchers without abandoning their values? One of the things we want to talk about is, as a student, you are asked to transform from the cultural orientation that you have right now. And let's talk about that for a second. Here's the first thing that happens. We are asking you, or the school is asking you, or any doctoral program that you're involved with, is asking you to move from the way you think currently, which is in the normative world. And when you talk about the normative, where you're basically looking at, well, this is what I've always done. This is the norm. This is what I'm expecting, right? And they're expecting you to go from what you are used to, which is the normative world, to the analytical world, where you focus in on analysis, and especially analysis of how you think and how others think. So you really want to move from that normative worldview to the analytical worldview, right? Then they're also asking you to move from the personal worldview to the intellectual worldview, right? Then they're asking you to go from the particular to the universal. When you start talking about the particular, we're saying that this is what I do. This is very meticulous. I am focused on this. This is what we do. This is how it's supposed to be done. Right? And then they're expecting you to move from experiential to theoretical. So here you're talking about where you're coming in and everything you understand is based on your perspective from your experience. Right? So one of the things we know, and the research bears this out, is that students often resist these perceived changes. And when you resist these perceived changes, it's like, well, you're trying to tell me how I should think. You trying to move me from what I always know, which is moving you from that normative to that analytic perspective. So we'll go through this process today so you got to get an understanding. Now, we know that there's a culture gap between doctoral students and faculty. As African Americans, this is a key element, and this is one of the key reasons why when we met as a group, we formed this group to identify the needs of our students to address something like this cultural gap, right? Students tend to feel that they're being asked to abandon their cultural values in favor of a new academic culture value. So you're moving you from, well, this is what I know, this is how I'm supposed to do it, which is that normative perspective, to now you're making me think and act like you. Well, there comes that clash, right? It can also cause problems with the smooth induction of doctoral students into the community of scholars. All right. To be effective studying in this space, doctoral students need to develop a high degree of methodological sophistication and flexibility. The key here is that methodological sophistication and flexibility. If you're in a doctoral program and you're not learning that flexibility, then that is going to cause a culture crash, right? They also need to be aware of the limitations of their own approach and value alternative approaches, along with being able to work with researchers, students, and faculty doing quite different work from what you're doing. So that's the thing when you talk about getting into a doctoral program and moving from a doctoral student to a researcher. Now you're going to be asked to work with alternative approaches, different ways to view the world, different ways to do things. So what I would like for you guys to do as I'm going through these conversations is think about some challenge that you've had in the program so far, and how did that make you feel in terms of the psychological maturity that we're talking about? Are you aware of the limitations of your own approach, and how are you valuing the approach of others as we go through this, right? So when we talk about transitioning from a doctoral student to a researcher, you are going to need to be able to have what we call psychological maturity. GCU doctoral students tend to be more mature with professional experience, and they're also very dedicated, right? They can sometimes be the same age or even older than the professors, right? And a lot of the times they're not willing to be treated as kids. So here you are. We're also saying that you're likely to be that take charge person. You've taken charge of your program and you're making it serve your needs, and you're not really waiting around for somebody to tell you or the program to shape who you are. That's who we are as doctors, as doctoral students. And again, this is a key element at schools like GCU, where they're bringing in professionals that have professional skills. So you're coming in with a lot of experience in what you have always done, right? Now, doctoral students tend to bring a wealth of professional expertise to the doctoral studies. What does this mean? This means that they don't want the program to explain to them what they already know. Don't tell me what I already know. I need to be exploring more, right? Their goal is not to explore an abstract question or follow a whim. Instead, their mission as doctoral students are to improve their chosen profession, right? This sense of mission can be a double-edged sword, right? Causing serious problems between the doctoral program seeking to turn practitioners into research scholars, right? And this problem is not because of lack of commitment, experience, or maturity. It is because of the clash of the two distinct cultures. So this is a key element that we're talking about here. There's usually a clash between the cultures, the academic culture of researchers and the professional cultures that the students come from. Okay? So we're talking about two types of conflicts that typically arise. One is differences in worldviews. And with the differences in worldviews, there's a struggle with the type of education needed to become an effective researcher. So remember the key element here, you're moving from a doctoral student to an independent researcher. The magic word is an independent researcher. Right? Research programs tend to require students to transform their cultures from normative to analytic, personal to intellectual, particular to universal, experiential to theoretical. So let's explore that for a minute. All right. As part of the potential pressures to change is the struggle over the relationship between being a professional and student and being a researcher. So you're a professional on one hand, you're a student on the other hand, and now you're transitioning to become a researcher. As a result of these three clashes or these culture clashes, doctoral students feel that doctoral programs are challenging the legitimacy of their professional knowledge. That is a major concern for doctoral students. Well, I am a professional, I've done this for so long, and now you're challenging my professional knowledge. Now, we're also saying that when that challenge comes in, this can result in doctoral students resisting the preferred research-based perspective and resisting key elements of the research training process. I'm going to tell you this particular piece here, and a lot of us have experienced this. I want you to think about what are the areas that you have had challenges since you came into the program, especially with respect to, hold on, especially with respect to, okay, I went too far. Okay, I lost my spot. Yeah. What are the challenges that you have had as an individual in terms of where you were wanting to resist that research-based perspective and just saying, I don't think I want to do it that way. I know how I want to do it. I need you to think about that and just write down some examples that you can think of for yourself as to when you face this particular challenge. I'll just give you about 30 seconds to do that. Okay. So we're going to talk about some suggestions to address that issue. One key suggestion is to address the issue. To address this issue is for doctoral students to view the research perspective as an additional perspective rather than a preferred substitute. When we talk about as an additional perspective, a big part of becoming an independent researcher is adding to your knowledge and adding to your perspective. So if you're looking at, well, if I have to work in this new environment, I have to basically no longer think about things in my old perspective, then you're not going to be able to really transition. So here we're saying you're growing as an individual and you're learning something new to add to your repertoire. That's one of the suggestions that we're talking about here, all right? One of the things we talk about here is because we're comfortable with the teacher-centered learning, the student-centered learning required in the dissertation process becomes a major challenge. So let's talk about that for a second. We're asking you to move from a teacher-centered learning style where you're actually out there and the teacher is the expert, and because the teacher is the expert, you're looking for the teacher to tell you, am I right or am I wrong? And in the student-centered learning, where the dissertation process, most of it is focused, is where you are having to become an independent learner and find information for yourself and move into that analytical thinking process, thinking about how you're viewing the world, and are there other views that you want to take into consideration as you're going through this, right? This process requires the doctoral student to move from a normative process that you usually use to that analytical process that is required in research. All right. The mission of the researcher is to provide valid explanations, make sense of the things, of how things work and how things don't work. This is the key element that we want to make sure that everyone is very clear on. What is the role of the researcher? The researcher is to make sense of what's going on in and around their world, especially their academic chosen field. What's actually going on there? What are you thinking about? What are you doing? How does it work? How does it not work? And be able to challenge what you think you know, right? The analytical process requires doctoral students and scholars to work through the intellectual components of problems, where you seek clarity and validate arguments about functions, dysfunctions, causes, consequences of what's actually happening in the practices that you are. So if you are a medical doctor and you're getting into research, now you're basically asking about what type of arguments are going on within the medical field on any specific topic. What are the things that are not working the way we think it could, right? What are the consequences of what is actually happening on the actual field that we're involved in? That's what we talk about, that when you become a researcher, these are the things that you're actually doing. Now, the mission of researchers and scholars is not an easy one, right? Here we are talking about doctoral students need to focus on what is going on and why it's going on, instead of what to do or how to do it. A lot of us come into the program and here's what we're saying. Okay, professor, I want you to tell me, what do I need to do to get out of this class? And how do I need to do it? Versus what's going on and why it's going on. So we're asking you to literally change the way you're thinking about what's going on in your environment, right? So the doctoral students' encouragement to resist the pressures from the professors to start looking at their field with the objective analysis. So the faculty is wanting you to start moving in and doing an analysis and an objective analysis of what's actually happening in whatever discipline that you are participating in. So if you're a psychologist and you're specifically working on one field, but what's really going on there, objectively, analyzing what's happening in that industry, all right? Now, based on doctoral students' background, they are often reluctant to embrace the analytical practices of research scholars. So when you have faculty and they're saying that we want you to literally analyze what's actually going on, and they're telling you that you need to go into the literature, see what the literature is saying, and do an analysis of it. Well, if I'm a medical doctor, I know what's going on there. So my experience tells me this is what's happening. And I want to hold on to that thought process versus doing an analytical practice, what's actually happening, right? The job of the faculty researchers is to conduct research. You are working towards becoming a researcher, and your job will be to conduct research, right? And in that conducting of that research, they are provided the space and time to work there. This is a key element here because the type of program we have at GCU is an accelerated program. And when I say an accelerated program, the typical brick and mortar institution usually have 16-week classes versus 8-week classes. Here is the challenge that you run into. The volume of work that is done in 16 weeks, the volume of work that's done in 8 weeks is the same. You're getting the same amount of information that you have to maneuver through. The challenge is now you have to do the same amount of information in half the time. We also run into the issue of not only am I doing it in half of the time, but I am also having a full-time job. I'm also having a family, and I have all of these demands on me, and I'm trying to do a doctoral program at the same time. I want you guys to think about what I just said for 1 second and write down 2 challenges that you have that relate to this particular topic, where you're doing a doctoral program and you have a family and you have a full-time job or a job, and how is that impacting how you approach your classes? Just write down, take a minute, write down how does that impact you, because I'm going to ask you guys some questions on this in the back end. I'll give you guys a minute or two to just think about that. Okay, let's continue. So to move from doctoral student to researcher, it requires change in occupational roles and accompanying change in professional priorities that are reflected in the shift from normative to analytical, from personal to intellectual, particularly from particular to universal, and from experiential to theoretical. Well, all of that sounds like gobbledygook when you say it. But what does that really mean when we talk about moving from or shifting from the normative to the analytical? Here, what we're talking about is we are all in our own little world and in our own little bubble. And while we're in that bubble, what happens is we know how things work in that bubble. So we know what to expect when we see certain things. Well, this is how it goes on. Perfect example. I've done a master's degree, and when I go to class, I basically look at the assignment, I get the assignments done, I look and focus on what the class tells me I need to do to get the A in the class, and the A becomes very important to me, so I'm doing what I need to do to get the A. So now I'm in that normative mode. Now what we're asking you to do is shift from being in the normative mode to that analytical mode. Are you analyzing what is the instructor asking you to do? Or are you doing just enough to get out of the class? So you're talking about shifting how you view what is expected of you in a doctoral program. Right? Now, the other thing is moving from personal to intellectual. Here you're talking about that personal, this is how I do things, this is what's going on, and you're being asked to go to that intellectual piece. Well, the intellectual piece is guided by intellectual, right, or intellect, as they say, rather than emotion and experience. Most of us as professionals, what do we fall into? We are guided by our emotions and our experience. So I'm a professional, I have experience here, and this is what's going to guide my thinking. Now, in terms of the doctoral program, it's now asking you to shift out of that personal into that intellectual, where we're now saying, I need you to be guided by what's actually objective material rather than how you feel or what you've done in the past. That's always a major challenge, right? Now, here we're talking about the particular to the universal. When you get into the particular, now you're saying, This is how I've always done it. I am focused on exacting, I need it to be this way and this way only. Well, if you are coming in as a student and you're saying, I know this is how it's supposed to be, and then you have a chair that has one viewpoint, a methodologist that has another viewpoint, and then you have a content expert that has another viewpoint. What do you think you're going to be up against at that point? You are now having 3 different viewpoints, and you're probably going to have to move from that particular way you're thinking to that larger viewpoint, that universal viewpoint. And then we're now talking about moving it from experiential to theoretical. So when you talk about that experiential, it's going to be based on your experience. But not because something is based on your experience means that that's all there is to that. We're now asking you to think about this in terms of an abstract concept and moving it from that theory. So when you start talking about the theoretical, one of the first things they ask you in your dissertation is, what is going to be your theoretical foundation? There's a reason they're asking for that, because now we're asking you to go from the concrete to the abstract. And how does that work? Right. Students should think of their transition from doctoral student to researcher as a process of adding a new perspective to what we call your cultural repertoire. So what you're doing is you're learning from what's going on and you're moving forward. I see a hand up, Miss Bailey. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question about this psychological material as a doctoral learner. And I know you're talking about the normative to the analytical, from the personal to the intellectual, and then you give them the rest of how we use from universal and experiential. So, so that's all of us as doctoral students.
Yes.
Is what you're saying. So my point is that what part do the do our chair plays in? Because remember, we are doctoral students. And we know we have the information as far as in the book, what the book wrote about and all of that. But how do we take our mind from that? We may be still on this things, this one normative point of view, going through the reading and going through the process. But if you don't have a chair and kind of like guiding you through this and kind of like talking with you, what is our expectation of the doctoral learner?
Okay, so I am really appreciative of that question.
Yes.
Because
on my hand,
one of the things that we're talking about here is this is a process. This is not a magic pill that we just say, oh, here it is. It is a process that you're going through. And one of the reasons we created this group that is called AADSG is because we identified that there is this need to help each other get through this process and work through some of the challenges with our peers in terms of how do they get from one process to the other? How do they get from one way of thinking and getting through the process? So that's why we wanted to get the students early enough so that they can understand that right now I'm talking globally, but when you come to our weekday sessions every Monday, that's when we can ask some specific questions to help you with whatever you're struggling with respect to helping you move from that normative to the analytical, helping you move from the thinking of just from the personal to the intellectual, and helping you get to that how do you look at this from a universal perspective? What role does theory play in your thinking, and how do you move from where you are to where you need to be? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, some similar to it, but I'll also say that we do also have a lot of different voices out there when we go to different learning groups on our calendar and everything. So
Mm-hmm.
in order for us to do this, it should be like you say, some type of university, everybody speaking the same tongue, not
Yes.
something different. So
Right.
if we hear different information, this is how the doctor learner get confused about different things.
Totally agree. And this is why this particular presentation is more of a general presentation and not answering a specific question for a specific student. We're wanting you to say, okay, here is the process that takes place. Once you understand what the process is, now then we can help the individual student with, oh, this is how I'm being impacted by the process and what the process is expecting of me. I know I need to change from this type of thinking to this type of thinking, but now you are asking the question, how do I do that? Am I hearing that question right?
Yeah, somewhat, but then also, Dr. Hayes, also will come into effect is the cost, is the financial burden that the students have too. So I understand what you're saying and how to have that great mind shift from
Mm-hmm.
one area to something else. And then, but it also come into a play if everybody is speaking of the same thing and not so much as the Dr. Learner spending so much financial, being in like in a financial debt just to try to get to point A to point B. And then the end results is to try to get to Z.
Right.
I mean, this is something like a financial burden on most of the doctoral learner. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I understand the great big mind shift, and I understand about the big co-op out there just trying to help each other. But even if they have these things out there, it still doesn't get better because everybody is saying something different. And
Right.
as they say something different, we study repeating class and paying for it, and some of them even dropping out at that point of time, or less alone staying in for a long period of time.
Okay.
So I understand what you're saying, and I get all that point, but I still doesn't see. And even if we come in at the very first beginning into the doctoral program and we go through our residency 1 and 2, I think it should be like a pre-course. So the doctors learners would really understand what they're getting into, not to
Mm-hmm.
just throw there and changing chairs along the way. And then you get some chairs just don't really give, a hope
Mm-hmm.
about your study. So it has to have like a balance. And I know it's a psychological material as a doctoral learner, but
Mm-hmm.
it has to be something on the university where the university can be uphold on their part of it
Okay.
as far as accountability.
Right.
That's what I have really been looking for since I've been in this program.
Right.
It's the accountability, not so much on the doctoral learner and shifting their mindset.
Okay. So what you're talking about, and I want to make sure that we're clear on what you're talking about there, is the institution of themselves. They are going to be responsible for their curriculum and what they deem necessary for their students to get through the process. As fellow colleagues and doctoral learners, we identified that this program can be extremely lonely, extremely frustrating because of having to do this shift. So this is why we have volunteered our time and volunteered our effort to reach out to students to say, if you need help with this transition, then that is what we are here to support. We have absolutely no control over the institution and what the institution puts into their curriculum. So unfortunately, we cannot speak to that. But what we're speaking to is what are the needs of our colleagues and peers, and how do we help our colleagues and peers to get through this paradigm shift that it requires to move you from a doctoral student to becoming an independent researcher. Because the idea of getting a doctorate is based on becoming an independent researcher. So that's kind of where we are, and I understand your frustration, but that would be a question that you probably have to address with the institution. All we're trying to do with our mission and our vision is to say that we know there are a diverse group of students out here that need help understanding even this basic concept of how do you transition from where you are currently to where you need to be at the end of the at the end of the process where you're moving from doctoral student into independent researcher. Okay. Does anyone else have their hand up with a question?
Yes, Dr. Linda has a question in the chat.
Okay, I was just, hello everyone. This is great information. I agree with Miss Marie about the gosh, it is frustrating. But if we are expected to complete this thing, and as I've stated in the chat, we don't expect this to be easy, but vague and difficult. I don't see why it has to be that either.
Mm-hmm.
And when we go from one person to the next, even within the committee, we find variations on the theme, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard when you're trying to do this thing, and it is a lonely process. And that's why when I sat down to do this thing, and it was so lonely, that's what made me do what I did with the dream catchers. I couldn't do this by myself, but your group has a better access, more lucrative access to what GCU has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
But at the beginning, a lot of us didn't know where to ask those questions. Where do I find this? Or how do I get into, how about the DC network being explained?
Mm-hmm.
They have things like, you can go to the library, you can sign up for one of those webinars for the library, things like that. They should do that with the DC network and with HALO.
Mm-hmm. Right. And these are the things that what we are saying as a group is that we need to be evolving and we need to be learning, because as we become independent researchers and we become vested in helping our colleagues and our peers to get to that finish line, we have got to come up with what resources, what are the struggles. So we want to continue to hear from you guys as to what it is you think we need to do. We became a student organization specifically for the reason of getting access to the faculty. That was the reason we designed the program the way we did it, because this is not about us. This is about us working with GCU to say what is in GCU's students' best interest. So this gives us access to the faculty who can help us answer the questions, because we have zero control over their curriculum, and we are never going to be talking anything about what they should or shouldn't do. We are just here to say, how do we help our students maneuver this process and transition from the doctoral student to that independent researcher? So Miss Linda, Dr. Linda, I totally appreciate that question. And you have been one of the major people that we depend on for help with a lot of different things. And we appreciate all you do. But I agree with you in terms of what we have. This is a very lonely process. And what we're trying to do is get as many of the students coming into the process as early as possible so we can start having these conversations early so that the students at least understand what the challenges that they're going to have ahead of them. And I will say one of the challenges that the students usually have ahead of them is the fact that they are used to, in their normative world, they are used to coming to a class, figuring out what it is going to take to get the grade in the class and get to the next class. And what that tends to happen is you end up missing material in some of the classes that you will actually need for the dissertation process. If you get to that process and you miss that information, guess what you got to do? Either struggle through the next class or now go back and relearn it. So a lot of the times that you have that, that is the struggle that our students are going to find themselves into. So we're trying to say, hey, let us help you identify some of your challenges early. Like, what are you doing to actually learn the material in the classes so that you will have it when you get to the dissertation? Or if you don't have it when you get to the dissertation, you got to go back and learn it because you're not going to be able to get to the dissertation without understanding what you're doing.
Let me just say this, that speaking to what you said, Miss Bailey, your concerns, and Dr. Linda, your concerns, and I think Miss Bell might have said it. And also speaking to what Russell said, is he was talking about us as this group having people from the school come in. That's why we have these speakers come in, so you'll have an opportunity to indicate to them what your concerns are and ask them questions. After this presentation this month, we're trying to get Dr. Marquette. Marquette, I'm sure you know by now, is one of the key faculty at GCU and seems to have, he has videos out there that some of you probably have used, and he is over a number of chairs and committees. So we're trying to get him to come in next month to talk about, follow up on what we're talking about right now, what you're asking about. Okay, these are the concerns that we have as doctoral students. Can you respond to them? So we're trying to, I'm just saying, backing up what Russell is saying. That's the reason why we're having this group. That's the reason why we want people to come. That's the reason why we're having these speakers, and especially the speakers that represent the faculty and GCU, because in my opinion, they need to hear that we are struggling. We do struggle, because you believe me, I struggle as well.
Right.
But thank goodness we were able to come together as a cohort and just try to get, it was a lot of requirements on our part just to try to come together to even start this process to extend it to other students. But again, I say they need to hear what the doctoral students' concerns are. And that's why we're getting key people. So hopefully, he hasn't responded to me yet, but hopefully Dr. Marquette will speak at the next meeting and you'll have an opportunity to present some of your concerns.
Okay. So one of the things that I would address as we're talking about this is a key element. If we are going to help each other, we are the ones that have to do it. And what that means is each one needs to bring one. Each one needs to see some of your colleagues and some of your peers and bring them to a place that I don't have all the answers, but guess what? because we know that the GCU faculty is out there. If you really have a question, we probably can find out who has the answer. We don't have to know all of the answers. That's why we are here working in collaboration with GCU so that the students can get the things that they're struggling with addressed, right? If we are here, we're here to help you understand what is the struggle and probably give you ideas as to how to get through the struggle as an independent learner. When I talked a minute ago, I was talking about how do you move from a teacher-centered learning model to a student-centered learning model, where you are the one that is taking ownership of your learning and you are becoming an independent learner. Well, we're also asking you not just to become an independent learner, but expand that into becoming an independent researcher. That's the process. And it is actually a process where you're actually changing as you grow as an individual. This process is designed to cause you to grow as an individual. Okay, great questions, guys. So let's go on. Now, this is what we're talking about here, where we're moving from that personal to that intellectual, where we as doctoral students tend to focus on the relationship that they establish with research faculty. Going back to when you focus on the teacher-centered way of doing things, in the past, you have a good relationship with the faculty, and that personal relationship with the faculty, you think, oh yeah, they're gonna do and help me through. And then they come back and they start challenging you. And now it causes you some cognitive dissonance, right? And there's cognitive dissonance with your worldview of scholarship, right? This is caused because the primary currency in scholarship and research tends to not be relationships, but instead ideas. So now the faculty is starting to challenge your ideas. And you're like, but wait a minute, you must not like me because all of a sudden you're challenging me. Is it that they're challenging your relationship with them, or are they challenging your ideas? Their role is to challenge your thinking. So if they're challenging your thinking and you're expecting them to be focused on your relationship, guess what's going on? You're going to have some issues. Right. Now, the quality of the scholarship is measured again by the quality of the ideas expressed. So when you write something for a faculty member, they're looking at the quality of the ideas that you put in that paper. And then all of a sudden you say, well, my gosh, they ripped my paper apart. Well, that's their job. It doesn't mean that they like you any less. It just means that the currency over here as a researcher is the currency of ideas. When you go to a presentation as a researcher, other researchers are going to be challenging your ideas. Why do you think what you think? How did you come up with that? So you get into becoming an independent researcher, you can expect the quality of the idea that you are presenting to be challenged. And this is what your chair does. This is what your content expert does. This is what your methodologist does. They challenge the content of the ideas that you present to them. And you have to be able to write clearly and concisely about what ideas that you are putting forth. So are you guys understanding what I mean here when we talk about why it is a challenge to move from a doctoral student to an independent researcher? Because now if you're expecting it to be continued to work in the way you have done it before, where it's based on the relationship and based on how you feel about the person, and then all that same person who was telling you they like you all along is now challenging everything that you put on that paper. Now you're going like, wait a minute, hold up here, what's going on? Right? So then you're talking about all those person-centered skills seem to be discounted in doctoral studies. Now, here are some simple questions that I want to ask you to use to evaluate the text. What's the point? As you're reading text and you're reading things and you're creating ideas, here's a simple question. What's the point? What's the point of reading what I'm reading? What's new? What are they telling me that I don't already know? I'm a professional. I know about this topic. I know about this field. I know about this area. So what are you telling me that's new? Who says? What credibility do you have to say what you're telling me in that article? Is that a credible source? That's what we mean by who says. So you will see a lot of the times you will turn something in to one of your committee members and they'll be like, who said that? You've probably seen that question a whole bunch. Where's the citation? You're making a bold statement and all of a sudden it's like, where's the citation? And then here's the other one. Who cares? Why do you care about what you're reading? Why do you care about what it is, what is being said to you? So these are some simple questions that you can use to evaluate text that you're reading. Clear, simple. Okay. Now, we talk about the dissertation journey. And this is something that I remember when I first started the program. It was very first one, it was a residency class, and they were expressing how lonely and cold and impersonal that this journey can be. This group was formed specifically because of that. We understood how lonely this process can be. You have little connection to flesh and blood, right? That emotional interaction that you've been getting all of your former life, all of a sudden it's gone. And then we add insult to injury where you're moved from in class to now remote. So you don't even get to see people on a weekly basis that you're used to. You're used to going to classes and having people that you interact with. So we want to make sure that we're saying, be careful not to embrace the anti-intellectual attitude where you're not moving from that normative to that intellectual. You have to focus on how do you get your mindset to transition from that normative to that intellectual. Researchers need highly developed intellectual capacities. Make sure you understand this statement that I'm making here. You are working on, as a doctoral student, the development of your intellectual capacities so that you would be able to interpret the evidence that's out there. You will be able to make arguments about what is out there and establishing valid grounds for actions where you're saying, this is why we should take this action. That is what we mean by moving from that normative to intellectual. As an independent researcher, your research should be saying, this is why we take the actions. This is why I'm recommending this action, because I think it's in good, solid grounds that we should take this action. And what happens a lot of the times is there is that anti-intellectual attitude that will creep in from frustration. Okay? Moving from the particular to the universal. Let's talk about that for a second. As doctoral students, there's a tendency to focus on the particulars of a situation. However, for researchers and scholars, there is an emphasis on the development of generalities that hold across all situations. As practitioners, we look at the situation and we say, this is what needs to happen based on this situation. As a researcher, we're saying, back it up a little bit and go, okay, if we're going to have this as a general practitioner, how does this work across different situations? We're asking that question. So the thinking as a practitioner versus the thinking as a researcher changes. You have to now start understanding what those changes are and how are you going to get on that journey so that you will transition from being a doctoral student to an independent researcher. Doctoral students preparing to become researchers should embrace the worldview that research is a second culture. This is one of the challenges that we have with who we are. We come from one culture, and the research culture is a totally different culture with totally different demands. So instead of demanding that you replace your original worldview, what we're saying is you're wanting to add to your current worldview. Right? It allows the doctoral students to approach research from multiple perspectives that is seen as important for producing research effectively captures the complex world of research. So you're wanting to add the new perspective. This is part of what I talk about when I say, as a doctoral student, you should be growing on a daily basis. Every part of this process should cause you to have additional growth as a person, and you are supposed to be a changed person when you go through this process because your thinking is going to be different. Okay? Moving from the experiential to the theoretical. Here, the doctoral students tend to have experiences as practitioners. And you guys have heard me say this over and over tonight. You guys are all practitioners with a lot of experience and a lot of expertise, right? Researchers are encouraging you, right, to stay arm's length from the arguments they encounter in the theoretical and empirical literature, because the student can introduce an example that will trump any argument made by the authors of the article, despite any data to support the arguments that you have. Right. Experience dominates other types of information in that domain. So as a practitioner, you have to now really think hard about, okay, because I'm a practitioner in this field and I know this, I've done this for 30 years, I've done this for 20 years, I know this. Well, if an article is telling me something different, guess what's going to happen? My experience is going to trump that article. So you now have to look at it through a new lens and go, as a researcher, how am I listening to, or how am I looking at what this article is saying? So you want to be paying attention to what it's saying versus what you know in your mind as this is the right way to do it. Is it the right way, or is it another way to do it? That's the question. Right. Doctoral students need to retire experience as a trump card and use it as a possible perspective to explore the possibility that the theory can be useful as experience and that the practice of theory building can be as important as the experience. That statement is key because, again, your experience will always tend to trump in your mind anything that the theory is telling you. But when you become a researcher, it's asking you to go, okay, let me look at this objectively. Okay. So how do we narrow the cultural divide? You should place a great emphasis on developing the researcher perspective as an addition to, rather than a replacement perspective. You should learn that differences are more a matter of emphasis in professional practice than opposition. That's another important statement right there. Learning the difference, that one is a matter of emphasis versus an opposition. So sometimes a committee member will come and give you, I think there's another way to do this. But in them saying there's another way to do this, they don't say there's another way to do this. They come to you and say, you should do it this way. And you go, well, they are in opposition to what I'm saying. Is it, or are they asking you to look at it from a different perspective? And this is where not what you say is important, but how you say it is important. So we have to remember that we have to take the emotion out of it and get to that place where we're evaluating what is being said to, is there a message here versus do I dislike the messenger? And I can give you guys a first-hand story of where I had to learn the hard way that there's a difference between the messenger and the message. I had one of the best messages in my life. The messenger sucked. So guess what happened? I was mad at the messenger, so I almost missed the message. Fortunately for me, I actually found it and go, oh, I might want to rethink that. Right? Doctoral students should also develop roles for themselves as researchers that incorporate their professional identities. So as a researcher, you want to incorporate your professional identity, meaning part of my professional identity should be, I am now a researcher. And because I am now a researcher, I'm going to be thinking like a researcher. The doctoral process is all about thinking like a researcher. And when we say that, we're also saying now that you do have your other identities. Now, what you're doing is adding the identity of a researcher and the thinking capacity of a researcher. Okay. So, narrowing the cultural divides. In order to become effective researchers, doctoral students need to acquire skills in and respect for the analytical, intellectual, theoretical, and universalistic orientation of researchers. Going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, right? Are you going to move from the normative to the analytical? Are you going to move from to the intellectual and the theoretical? And are you going to move to the universal orientation? That's the question. Okay. Research preparation programs involves changing people in valued directions. As adults, we are faced with the prospect of learning, and learning means changing into someone different. That's the key. You, as a doctoral student, should be learning, and as you're learning, you're also changing. And you're going to change by the end of the process. The process is designed to change you from who you were to who you're going to be. And who you're going to be should be you are becoming a researcher. Okay. Now, I'm going to open the floor up for questions. And before you leave and ask some questions, I would like for each of you to do me a favor before you run out. And I want you to give me 3 things that you will take away from this presentation. Please add it to the chat. 3 things that you will take away from this presentation. And while you guys are adding to the chat, I will go ahead and I will open the floor up for questions. Ms. Anderson, you got a question?
No.
Do we have any
takeaways?
Yes, if everyone could just give me some feedback in terms of what your 3 takeaways from this presentation is, I would appreciate that. 3 things that you would take away.
I'm gonna get another one.
I'm reading the comments as you guys put them in. Thank you, Ms. Linda. Dr. Linda? So the floor is open for any questions or comments as we move forward. Anything that I can answer?
I'm a little biased, but I added be flexible, don't get stuck. Attending this study group will keep you unstuck. And I was really stuck when I started this study group about, I think it was in October when the group first started. And I mean, it's helped me so much. It helped me to get unstuck. And I think everybody in the doctoral program, at some point or another, you're going to get stuck or you're going to feel stuck and you don't know which way to go. But having somebody that's been there to walk you through, to listen to you, is going to be, I mean, so invaluable to have that, or somebody that will take you aside in one of the rooms and say, okay, what's the problem here? And help you, because you will get stuck and you have to be able to keep moving. That's the point. And I see some people on this call that they've graduated already, like Dr. Coleman's on here. He works at GCU in security. And he always tells me, keep it moving, keep it moving. And so anyway, just kudos to our study group, to I want to say Mr. Haynes Russell and Dr. Morgan and Dr. Evans and Vicki have been so helpful to me. And I just encourage you that don't let this be your last time. Don't let this be your last time, because you have something that you can add to this group that will help all of us. And we now have Dr. Singh that's also, yeah, so please don't let this be your last time.
And again, I want to encourage all of the new people to not just return, but also bring a friend, because this journey can be very isolating. It can be very lonely, and you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of us, we don't know the answer to everything, but you know what we do know? We do know who to ask. That much we can tell you. We do know who to ask, and we have had great support from GCU faculty, that when we reach out to them and we ask a question, that they respond to us, and they respond to us timely. So again, bring the questions, bring a friend, bring someone who you know could benefit from the community that we're trying to build.
Russell, did you mention about the app? I had to walk away, so.
No, I did not mention about the app. I'm sorry. For those of you who are new, let me put the app in the, I'm going to put the app in the, thank you for reminding me, Rochelle. Dr. Morgan, sorry.
I know, I'm Rochelle. That's okay. I'm okay with Rochelle.
In a professional setting, you're Dr. Morgan. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm going to put the app in.
Not to call you out, Dr. Rochelle, but there's been other requests for those that have earned the title to please put the title in front of their name.
Okay, so I have added the link to our web app membership for the group. is free. We encourage people to participate in the group. All of our videos would be accessible to members. So we make copies of the presentations, and all of the members of the group will have access to watching the videos going forward.
Thank you, Russell. Dr. Singh, I wanted to answer your question about will you be inviting GCU faculty for presentation like these on this platform? We have, the last was, who was the last person who did the presentation? Dr.
Zayas.
Dr.
Dr.
Zayas.
Zayas.
So, yes, so we have asked and we have coming in the future more of GCU faculty who does present. So Russell is the first one to present from our group, and the other ones have been the librarian and other faculty members.
Okay. So
Thank
what
you. That's nice to know.
Yeah, so what we do at the end of the year is we develop a presentation program for the entire year, and we look at the topics that we think the students are going to most benefit from. Then we identify the best person to deliver that message. So
we might be asking you next year for 2026, Dr. Singh, so you never know. We might be asking you to do a presentation for us.
Anytime.
Right. Okay. Again, the floor is open for any questions, comments that you'd like to put at this time.
We can't hear you. Was anyone saying something?
Yes, whenever you decide to go into the app, just please comment because we like your input. You have great ideas, I'm sure, and that would help us as a group, all of us, to move forward positively.
Thank you.
Okay, if we do not have any more questions, what I will do is I will stop the recording at this point, and we will have the room open for any discussion and open discussion.